Okay, girl. Welcome to the after show, lady. Dom, that was such a vibe. Kimberly's
Ooh,
like BFFs in
W.
my head.
Yes, yes. I'm like,
It
oh
was really
wait,
good.
when we all going to brunch? Like,
Exactly,
that's what
right?
I need to know. When is brunch?
Exactly. Yes, I really enjoyed her tips. I'm like, this is so helpful. I think it'll be super valuable. And I think one of the things that really stood out to me was the idea of career and it not being this lifelong commitment, the way that,
Right.
our parents or grandparents may have seen their career, that it was like a boom. I mean, I feel like I know that, but I think a lot of other people are setting unrealistic expectations of themselves.
Expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like, I got out of school. What am I going to do? What am I going to commit to? And it's like, you don't really have to. Like, you can the same way she listed off what 6 careers. I've had so many different jobs, and they've all given me valuable tools and experiences that I can now use in my day to day now. But you get to meet new people. I mean, make it fun, right?
Yeah, you figure it out. And I think the thing is, because like
Yeah,
I was even thinking about when she made that point about like the actual jobs versus like the
right.
career. Like I think about even for myself, like I have a career, but I have had multiple jobs within that same career trajectory, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then I also think about leading up to like graduating from school, all them
Hmm.
years in school. Like I think about
Yes.
the jobs that I had during school,
Hmm.
things that I was like, oh, I'm just doing this because, I need the money, right? Like this work
Yeah,
study gig. Like, how was this? I think back to I work study when I was in undergrad was
right.
with the athletics office. Now, mind you, I was at a small school. So our athletics office was nothing like being at like a state school with a huge football team and basketball team and all that. It wasn't as big, but there were sports teams, right? And so, but I think about the work that I did and the exposure that I got to people outside of my everyday network. And how, even though I didn't necessarily need to leverage those connections, I could have potentially, like, an opportunity could have presented itself where I needed to leverage those connections.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. That was another thing she mentioned that was so spot on because Dom, you know, I'm sure you've probably noticed it in this area that we're in, but Silicon Valley is a very network based
Yes,
environment. Like I remember coming out
yes,
here almost 6 years ago and it was so hard to find a job because you really in a lot of cases if you're coming here and you don't have a lot of experience and you're trying to make your way into like the tech industry, which is my experience, you got to know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody and I ain't know nobody. And
right.
so, once I did finally get into the tech bubble, I realized how they would be putting their friends on, like people that you went to school with.
Mhm.
So many of the C-suite execs, they're like, you
Yes,
know, transferring between companies because they know people or they built a relationship with them in school or wherever. And so I think the networking piece is so key. And I think a lot of times, some people sleep on that. I know my school, like in undergrad, they taught us about the importance of having a network. And so it was just so key. Like connect with the alumni, right? Like do what
yes,
you have to do to build those connections with people before you need them. That's the key though.
yes,
And
that's
I'm
the
glad she
key.
pointed that out because you don't want to come up, if you're only reaching out to people when you need them, it's like,
They know,
that's kinda tacky. Yeah,
they
they
know.
know, and it's like
That's
everybody
okay.
else is reaching out to them, right?
Right, right. And
So,
I love what
yeah.
she pointed out too with that of recognizing that when you were in college, you don't have to give anything.
Mhm.
That it's
Yeah, that was good.
okay, that the expectation is that you're reaching out and it's not going to be reciprocal. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
that's what we think about, right? Like
Mhm.
that it has to be reciprocal. And I also think too about like how that doesn't just apply to college students, but that applies to the rest of us too, right? So if you are
Mhm.
reaching out to someone who's in a higher level than you, so, like, let's say you're entry level, or maybe
Yeah.
you're mid management, and you're reaching out to someone who's C suite level, there's not necessarily, it's not an equal dynamic.
Yeah, and don't try to make it seem like one, because then that'll be super weird, like, "Oh, I can do this for you," and it's like, in
Nah,
some
I'm
cases,
good. I
what you
got,
gonna do?
right.
Yeah.
It's like
What you
I'm
what you
good.
gonna do? What you gonna do for me? But I
Right.
will say, because I had this technical background, my husband's making fun of me to go like this on the side. Because I have this technical background, there were because I'm that person where I'm always like, well, I want to be able to offer value for this person and not just be asking for something. So in some cases, I was able to do like website work for someone in
Right.
exchange for something. So I was like, I want to do something for you. But a lot of times, it's like, what can we really do for the person?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think also the surprising thing
Hmm.
in that interview was when she talked about like her relationship um, advice that she gives friends, right?
Right.
So
Right.
at first, and I'm saying surprising in that I wasn't expecting her to share that, right? Like I
Okay.
didn't wasn't expecting that to be shared. But the
Yeah.
more she talked about it, the more it made sense, right? Because if
Right.
she's working in career development, it's about relationships, it's about people, right? So, and how she approaches like networking and engaging with people,
Yeah.
it
Hmm.
makes sense, right?
Yes. I feel like if I was like to go back in time, like usually I'm like, oh, I don't have regrets. But if I were to go back in time, I would have dated that way. Right? That sounded
It
so
makes
fun.
sense. It makes
I
sense to me, right? Now, I will say I'm a
Yeah.
little intimidated by personally just being at like a bar by myself, but that's
Yeah,
my
yeah,
stuff. Like I know that about me, right? But
yeah. No, I was
but
gonna say, I used to be that way too. I did when I was in grad school, that was a period where I did start taking myself on dates and doing dinner. It was so awkward initially, but I feel like you said, it makes sense, and I'm like, if I were to go back in
it
time, I
does.
would definitely do that because you get to meet a lot of people, figure out if you have chemistry instead of doing the whole text thing. And you know how sometimes you might be texting with someone and you're like, I'm starting to kind of feel you a little bit, and then you meet them and you're like, yo, this person, nah, it ain't gonna work out. You know what I mean? So yeah, I thought that was brilliant. I think I'm
Yes,
so excited for this episode. I'm really excited. Lady, hopefully you enjoyed it as well. And yeah, I hope that it helps folks that are kind of figuring out what they're trying to do in their career and maybe even the dating world, you
exactly.
know?
We might have to have her back
Mhm.
on to talk more about that.
That's what I thought too. She's fun. We
Hmm.
may have to do that.
Yep.
All right, lady. Well, thank you for tuning into the after
Yes.
show.